we have up here 2 Academy Award nominees, a Tony winner. So I'm going to start with the new guy, Jonathan
That's me.
Perera, who wrote the screenplay. He was a corporate lawyer in London. He was a school teacher in South Korea. How the heck did this happen?
It's a very good question. Actually, I was a corporate lawyer for just as long as I needed to be in order to pay off my college debts, whereupon I ran for the exit to pursue a career in screenwriting, mainly because I love movies and I was reasonably okay with words, I thought. So I taught English at a university in China for a year, just to keep a roof over my head while I taught myself the basics of screenwriting. After a year in China, I moved to South Korea, and it was there that I saw a TV news interview with a guy I'd never heard of before by the name of Jack Abramoff. I'm sure you're all familiar with him. By the end of the interview, I was kind of glued to the screen thinking, what an interesting world in which to set a screenplay. So that was the genesis of the idea, and it was in South Korea that I conceived and planned and wrote Miss Sloane. In South Korea that I got my representation while working at an elementary school. Took a lot of general meetings over Skype from my classroom with little Korean 8-year-olds waving in the background. And it all...
Got photobombed in your conference?
I did, by a posse of Korean kids, yeah. And it all happened while I was in South Korea, all the way up until August 2015, when I finally, to my chagrin, had to quit and focus on this full time. But interestingly enough, kind of before I met my representatives or my agents or anyone from Film Nation who optioned the script, the first person I met in connection with any of this industry, this world, was the man to my right, John Madden, whose hand I grasped in London one day.
Did you have the screenplay in the other hand?
I didn't. He had it on the table in front of him, I think open on his laptop. And when I finally shook the man's hand, it was at that point that I realized that this isn't a paranoid delusion, it's actually happening. So in a nutshell, there you have it.
John Madden, so he didn't stalk you with the screenplay. How did it come to you?
It came, dropped into my inbox from via Film Nation, via my agent, who I think Film Nation had approached and said, which of your directors do you think might be interested in this? Anyway, I read it. It's an extraordinary feat of imagination, the script, which is nevertheless not an imaginary world. Although there are imaginary elements to it, the fact that the piece of legislation gets passed puts it in the realm of fantasy, I think. But there are many ways in which, it was both an extraordinary story, very, very well told, about extremely interesting and contentious issues. It's obviously about the paradox of why this intractable issue persists, in which most of the country believe something should be done about access to weapons, but nothing ever does get done in the legislative process. We expected that to be an issue in the film. We didn't expect other aspects of the film to become such an issue, which is the political process itself, and particularly the idea of women in politics. That has become bizarrely appropriate in terms of the film's release. But the chief reason that I was attracted to the script was just an extraordinary character study, and in a sort of perfect piece of synchronicity, within the first few pages, I thought of one person for this role, which is not quite as opportunistic as it sounds, because she and I have been trading material since a film we made earlier together called The Debt, when Jessica was not well known at all, and it just a movie that screamed to be made. And Johnny and I, this handshake that I'm now back at, started working on it together for 6 months to bring it into the form that it now is.
And Jessica Chastain, lobbyists rank even below politicians when it comes to a lot of public rankings. So how did you prepare a character who intrinsically seemed unlikable, but you had to keep the audience rooting for you somehow?
I always start with a lot of research. I start with the script. For me, the script is everything. I find all the clues that I can use for the character. It helps you not play the same character over and over again in many movies. I read Jack Abramoff's book, actually, not even being told to or that it was an inspiration for the script. I found out how much money was in lobbying, which was shocking to me. I talked to production about working with a lobbyist, and they had hired someone, and I met with him. And then it was really important for me to meet with female lobbyists because less than 10% of lobbyists are women in DC, and I wanted to understand that dynamic. So I just Googled and found, list of the most powerful female lobbyists in DC. I called their offices, and their assistants kind of thought it was a joke or it was some kind of hoax. And then I showed up one weekend and met with 11 women. All of my stereotypes of what a lobbyist were just blown out the window. 7 of the 11 women had black nail polish on, which to me I was so shocked by. I thought I'd wear no makeup in this movie and just, be this dogged, all-work person. And then I realized how these women had to present themselves in the world. It was their armor, their suit, their battle cry. They had to send the energy into the room before they arrived. And that was very useful to me. And also we talked about drugs in DC and personal lives and all that stuff. So I have never said the names of the people that I've met with just because it was such an honest, open conversation. I wouldn't want to know that I blow my sources out of the water.
Very journalistic of you to protect your sources. John Lithgow, you had to play a senator who, he shifted during the course of the film back and forth, and yet you had to keep a core that would also keep us interested and keep us not entirely hating this man. In fact, on his side and feeling sorry for himself at some point. How did you do that?
Does this, yes, I can be heard, all right. I just thought of myself as a senator, and
Anybody in particular come to mind?
not really. Patrick Leahy had those little glasses. He's pretty much the only person. I didn't have time to think of anything. I was jumping off another enormous project, and I got an email from John like the last week. I was working on an 8-month-long project in England, and I think within weeks I was in Toronto playing this senator. So what I found fascinating about him was he would be one of my senators. He would have been one of the guys I voted for, and on the same side as me on all kinds of issues. But you see him capitulate to pressure, which is the most interesting and realistic thing about Washington and about politics in general, certainly in this country, is that pressures are constantly on you, and those pressures have a lot to do with money. This, of course, made him a very, very interesting character to play. I read the script and it completely blew my mind. It was such a brilliant piece of storytelling. The fact that you learn Sperling's secrets as you're learning the secrets of the entire plot, and yet you've been watching him all this time in the present time, where all the events of the past are brought to bear on what's actually happening, and it all collides together at the moment. And the last thing he expects is to be exposed in public. These are just wonderful things to hang on to for an actor. I sort of didn't need to do any research, besides which I've played 3 or 4 senators before. It was pre-researched.
So you have tenure.
Yes, right. I haven't been voted out of office yet.
And Jessica Chastain, as with O Dark 30, you play a driven character who is driven among men who all think they know better. So how did you strike the balance in this one?
Well, in Zero Dark 30, the character was so anti-political. There was something almost immature about her, where she would just cut people down and doesn't care who her boss is, and just, she was almost like a teenager. And Elizabeth, she's very fluid with the way she can manipulate. She's almost seductive. And I needed to know, it was more of a strategy where she had to always figure out how to get someone on her side. I mean, it could be in terms of being a mentor, it could be in terms of intimidation, it could be flirting like she does with the senator in that fundraiser. There's, she has many masks, this character, that she uses to her benefit.
And John Lithgow, your character in particular, finds that he has to compromise in order to achieve the right thing. Whether his selfish motives are one thing, but he believes in the political process. Evidently, we're seeing this in real time in the elections right now. So did you approach it as someone who understands the American voter, the American voting process, or was it just a character that you plucked out of your own ether to make the senator work?
Well, I think that's a pretty accurate description, plucking it out of the ether. But so much of it was right there in the script. I think he just didn't. He knew he had to go through this, or he would be voted out of office. He couldn't face just the power of money, the onslaught of money paid to unseat him. So he went ahead with this and just hoped he would get through it. He would somehow discredit this woman without doing too much damage to her and without it going too far. And then it goes further and further and further because nothing works. To me, it's appalling to him that he has to resort to his last couple of stratagems. He never wanted this rent boy to sit at a desk in a Senate hearing room and dredge all this garbage up in front of the public. He never wanted this to happen. He didn't want to be the engine for this, and yet he had to. And not even that worked. So that little moment of disgust is my favorite moment in the performance. It's just superb moral dilemmas, and everybody in the script has them. Everyone has to make choices, and it's incredibly hard to make right choices in such an atmosphere. That was my approach.
Won't you please thank our panel?